An amazing warm welcome, Michelle Cowan.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'd like to acknowledge the ancestors of this beautiful land and pay my respects to you and to all elders past, present, the then and now, and to the emerging elders of this nation and all other nations in this land. I would like to acknowledge all non-Aboriginal people here today and pay respects to you and your ancestors. I wish to welcome you into my dreaming, my spirituality, to hold you all safely without discrimination, without racism, and to honour your presence and mine as one mob, with a connection that is worth honouring, with dignity and without denial of identity, because we can't do it alone. Thank you. I want to present to you today incarceration rates and its links to the continuation of systemic and complex trauma and the impacts this has on our health and ability to access services. We will see what transgenerational trauma looks like and couple this with systemic trauma and the expectations and obligational functionalism of living in a modern day world keeping our culture alive. What does transgenerational trauma look like? We talk about it and it's been mentioned 5 times over the last 2 days. So because we talk about it a lot, I'm a very visual person and like you can tell me lots of words. I'm not good with words. I always tell people I'm really dumb when it comes to words and that's okay, I can own that. But giving you a visual of what it looks like to me is very important. And this came to me, I don't know how many years ago, when I first met the beautiful Judy Atkinson, and she talked about the layers of trauma and the trauma trails, and she gave me her book. And it really made me think, okay, so what does that actually look like? So you'll see what I've come up with. So why is transgenerational and intergenerational trauma continuing to have a compounding devastating impact on all Aboriginal peoples and communities? Incarceration rates and the effect on communities. So we've already heard a lot about this, but you're going to hear it again because we can't hear it enough. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people represent 29% of the total full-time adult prisoner population during March quarter 2023, whilst accounting for approximately 2% of the total Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australian population aged 18 years and over. 36% of these were awaiting trial on remand and 63 were sentenced. It may have changed a little bit just recently. I didn't update my stats last night. Over the past decade, incarceration rates of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have risen 88%, and we are now 14 times more likely to end up in prison than non-Indigenous people. Aboriginal people are 16.5 times more likely to die in prison than a non-Aboriginal person. And more than 562 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have died in custody since the end of the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody since 1991. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, this is very upsetting, are the fastest growing segment of the prisoner population and are 21 times more likely to be in prison than non-Indigenous women. 80% of these women are mothers. 100% of these women have suffered domestic violence. 100% of these women suffer from mental health and are often criminalised by the police. And 100% of these women have suffered sexual abuse. These women make up 35% of the female prison population, which is a 148% increase since 1991. And as you should all know by now, we have one of the lowest ages of criminal responsibility in the world. In Australia, children can be charged with offences and placed in detention from the age of 10 years. And if you've ever been or ever have a chance to go into a detention centre and see a 10-year-old, I guarantee you cannot walk out the same. It is incredibly cruel and it's just not. 50% of Indigenous youth under youth justice orders were 15 years or younger compared to 33% of non-Indigenous youth. 1 in 8 were younger than 13 years compared to 1 in 20 non-Indigenous youth. The criminalisation of our children is a nationwide disgrace that disproportionately impacts Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. And almost 2 out of every 3 young person in detention are unsentenced, and they're there awaiting the outcome of their court matter, and they're left in detention because often there is nowhere, no fixed address to bail these young people to. So often the detention centre is the safest place for them to remain. So often they reoffend to go back to where they can sleep feeling safe, get fed well and go to school safely. We know that so many Aboriginal children in detention have come from out-of-home care and remain in the system. The minister has parental responsibility, yet it is this same system that is their jailer. And children who have had a parent in jail are 6 times more likely to go to prison themselves. So Aboriginal people connect through Mother Earth and Father Sun, and we have a very deep connection to the land and to the sea. It runs in our blood. So this is the general diagram of structural functionalism of a non-Aboriginal family. So you can really get an idea of the structure. It's quite well structured, you know, it's pretty simple. This is the general diagram of structural functionalism of the Aboriginal family. Everything is connected. Right? There is nothing that is not connected. So then we have to put that together. We have to live without expectations of a non-Aboriginal society, and we have to live through our obligations to our family and to our mob. And that's pretty tough, isn't it? So when culture is lost, destroyed or prohibited, we lose our identity, we're stripped of dignity, and we have no sense of belonging. We remain invisible, and when we're invisible, we don't have a voice. So collective and systemic trauma continues to this day, resulting in more than 200 years of colonisation, disempowerment, dehumanisation and segregation. And a lot of people say to me, yes, that's, 200 odd years ago and then some. But, I was only 6 years old when my father was pushed off the footpath in Grafton because he was a black CUNT. I was 6 years old crying about my dad being pushed off the footpath. So I remember that very, very well. So this is the trauma circles, if you like. The yellow circle represents a single trauma. So it's also referred to as a simple trauma, where one thing can happen and it doesn't impact our life for a long time. It just impacts it a little bit, maybe a year, maybe not, but then people can build enough resilience and recover. Then you have the blue circle, which is the complex and accumulative trauma. So what's happened in the yellow circle generally happens again in the blue. So, of course, then you have less resilience and it takes much, much longer, if ever, to actually get back to the way life was before. And then, of course, the green circle, we have the collective and systemic trauma, which then, of course, is the ripple effect is the intergenerational, transgenerational trauma. So there is massive amounts of trauma there, the collective and systemic trauma that continues today, namely in racism, and I see it absolutely everywhere I go, even to myself because I'm fair-skinned. Every part of being Aboriginal is difficult, except the love that I feel. It's critical that healing programs have a strong emphasis on restoring, reaffirming and renewing a sense of pride in cultural identity, connection to country and a belonging to community. It's so important so that we know who we are. To understand why our incarceration rates are so high and why we suffer chronic health issues, we must understand transgenerational trauma and what it looks like. Judy, I hope I've done you proud. So we've done 7 generations of transference of trauma. So generation 1, we go back to when it all first started. So we have stolen children, loss of culture, sexual abuse. And we have loss of self, disempowerment, isolation, colonisation, genocide and racism. There was nowhere, nothing that these people couldn't stop it. They weren't in control. There was no one to turn to. Police didn't care. Yeah, it was a penal colony. So then Generation 1 raised their children through their trauma. So the problem we have is that Generation 2 also were very severely traumatised. So they too had stolen children, racism, loss of culture, sexual abuse, segregation, isolation, oppression policies, loss of self, loss of safety. There was nowhere to feel safe. Then Generation 2 had children, and they also reared their children through their trauma. So, stolen children, racism, loss of culture, shame, flora and fauna, oppression, sexual abuse, suicide, justice system, loss of safety, loss of identity. Still nowhere for anybody to go to get help, even now. So then Generation 3 had children. So now they're rearing their children through their trauma. And everything the same happened again. And then, of course, they have children. So then you've got Generation 5. When they have children, they're still rearing their children through their trauma. And of course, when Generation 6 have children, that's where we're at. It's a massive amount of trauma. Massive amount of trauma. But then we have to add it all together. So I'd just like to know, when you look at that, where do you start? Where do you start to help somebody unravel their incredible inbuilt trauma that they don't even know? They don't even know. It's just how they live. So whereabouts do they fathom what's right, what's wrong? It's incredibly difficult. That was me. That was me. The only way that I could get well was to study and to find out and ask questions. And I wanted to heal. I wanted to heal so badly because I have 11 biological children. My partner has 4, so we have 15 biological children, 27 grandchildren, and we've fostered more than 100 children. We absolutely dedicate our lives to children, and we still do. So I'll continue on with this in a minute, but a little bit about what we do. I'm very, very fortunate, I believe. It was extremely difficult for me to actually do university. My mother was the perpetrator, not my dad. My dad was an incredibly beautiful man who died as an alcoholic when I was 16, and I still miss him to this day. I suffered sexual abuse from the age of 2. It's my very first memory. And there was incredibly chronic domestic violence in my home that I remember very well, but my mother was the perpetrator. So when you're working with people and you think that they can't recover, I don't necessarily believe that I've recovered, but I know I can make a difference and I know that I'm where I'm meant to be. So, and I sort of kind of fell into this work because I love doing numbers, I love accountancy, I love bookkeeping, and that's what I went to TAFE to study because I knew I could do that, and I didn't want to be just a mother. And I excelled. I won all the big awards at TAFE. My God, I even got a cheque for $500 because I excelled so much. It was incredible. And so then my daughter was sexually abused by the Christian school in Grafton, which you might all remember. She was one of 7 that I know that he abused. Of course, I was a single mum at that stage, so I was, open slather. And I was working at Bunnings, and I was having parents come in to me and say, please, can you help me with my child? And one day we left. I had to go with a mum. She was hysterical. And we actually got to her house, and her daughter was hanging on the fan in her bedroom. So we saved her. We got her down. And I've even managed to... I work a lot with Shine solicitors, and I love them to pieces. And we have, we've had her sorted out and things are doing okay. But it was in that time that I suddenly realised, from my own experience, my own lived experience, I can actually help people. So back to TAFE I went. And I did community services. I'm an Aboriginal practitioner, so I did all of that. I did mental health, I did case management, anything. I did anything. And even the newspaper put up a big story about this. Oh, super mum. Nah, it was just a person. Because my children I'd feed them, bath them, in bed at 8:30. Bedtime was 8:30, and then it was my time to do my study. And I finished everything I could do at TAFE, and I went back to TAFE and I said to the head teacher, what else can I do? And she said, oh, fuck off, Shell, and go to uni. Guess what? I did. I went to uni. And I've got 6 minutes. Just wind that back. And anyway, so now I am a victim services appointed counsellor. I am in private practice. I have worked in private practice for about 4 years. I have never charged a single person. Doesn't matter who comes to see me, I've never charged anybody, because nobody ever should have to pay for trauma help. I don't believe, and I work with a lot of children. You can Google me, I'm all over Google. I work a lot with youth suicide, extreme advocate for youth suicide and suicide ideation. I do incredibly huge grief work, because it's the one word that hasn't been mentioned much at all. Only Gary mentioned grief. And, it's one thing I wanted to say to you, the parents of the children yesterday in your story. Part of what you're suffering is grief. Yeah, massive grief. And, with the NDIS, God forbid, that's another day. That's another day. But you should be entitled to counselling through NDIS, because that would enhance your children's emotional and social well-being. So, yeah, that's another story. But we do have a private therapy house in Grafton. I'm very fortunate. My second son has done very well. He invented the navigation system on the Next G, and so he is able to actually support us a lot with what we do. He's very supportive. We have open house that people can just come to. If they're unsafe, if they don't feel well, they can come have a cuppa. I'm usually always there 13 or 14 hours a day. I do have another home, but, I love being where I am. And we support a lot of children. And if I quickly flick through here, I just want to say, especially with children, but also with adults, we remember trauma less in words and more in feelings in our bodies. It's one of the ways I work when I am in a counselling session. I watch the person that I'm working with, and I can usually always tell where they're feeling it. And I have a saying, if it walks like a duck and sounds like a duck, mate, it's a duck. And that duck has been sexually abused. And I'm always right. So trauma, grief and sensory work. There is a need to help children do very heavy sensory work. When there is no words for feelings and is carried very heavy in their little bodies, a sensory workout is essential. Body socks, crash mats, sensory swings, shaving cream. Awesome! And tunnels are all so very important and helps relieve the stored anxiety and stress within their little bodies. Understanding deep grief where there can be no words for it requires senses to be activated and calm. I have the family whose mum and dad were killed in the bus crash in Singleton. I have the 2 little boys and the grandparents, and I do massive sensory work with them. My daughter is an OT In 4 weeks' time, she's fully qualified, and we do huge sensory work. But we don't just do it with the children, we do it with the adults as well. It's terrific. I cannot recommend it enough. Shaving cream on windows is beautiful for regulating the heart. Just fantastic. So we need to be partners in managing their behaviour. Always, please remember, co-regulation always comes before self-regulation. It's been pointed out and stated time and time again throughout this conference, we need to listen. We need to listen, not to answer. We need to listen to hear. We need to hear the pain. We need to hear the unspoken words. We need to look at the body language, and we need to look at the somatic reactions, so whereabouts they're feeling it in their body. And any of you that have ever seen any of my presentations online, you'll see in my room it is chock-a-block full. I have sensory toys, I've got animals, you name it, I've got it in there. Because if you have a head that's extremely traumatised, the worst thing you need is a clinical space. You don't need space, you need to feel like you're contained. When you come into my room, it's extremely welcoming. There's just stuff everywhere, and it's great. I have adults on the floor, I have kids on the chair, I have kids on the back of chairs. It doesn't matter. So please remember, and this is something that I point out a lot, if you're a safe person and a child has built a rapport with you, or a young person, and you're working with that traumatised person, it's highly likely you'll be yelled at, screamed at, and the young person will try to scare you away. They will try to make you believe what they believe, and that is they're bad. They'll do whatever it takes. Usually will never hurt you, but they will scream and yell at you. If you walk away, you're reinforcing their dislike and hatred of themselves, so be brave and stay. Understand that what they are saying to you is their own internal voice, saying what they feel about themselves. Be brave. And imagine, we know that early intervention is most important, we know that. However, imagine schooling for children with a classroom limit of just 15 children per class. Imagine if that teacher had an OT in their room. Imagine if every child was not only heard and seen, but felt heard and seen. Imagine the difference in every aspect of their life. It'd cost a heck of a lot less too. And please remember that it's not that the child won't, it's that the child can't. If you learn nothing more from the 2 days, that you must remember that. It isn't that the child won't, it is that the child can't. We must not punish trauma behaviours. This reinforces to the child or the young person that they are bad, they deserve it. This is one thing, because I've heard a fair bit about mobile phones over the 2 days. I just want to say to everybody, a major protective factor in suicide ideation is please do not take your child's mobile phone off them. If you have already given them a mobile phone, please do not take it, because if they leave, if they run, they're going to take their mobile phone. If you take it, they're not going to take their mobile phone. So how can you communicate? How will you know where they are? It is their one lifeline. If you take that, you're taking their lifeline. I cannot advocate enough. I work with youth suicide almost every day. Do not take their mobile phone. If you've already given it to them, it's done. And believe me, usually always in their darkest moment, they'll call somebody. That's it. Okay, thank you. Yes, perfect.